Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Suryati Az'linda binti Suruji. Today I will be presenting a case study on a fatal construction accident that occurred in year of 2025 in Bukit Mertajam, Penang. This case involves a surveyor who fell to his death from the 8th floor of a building under construction. I will be discussing the details of the incident, analyzing what went wrong, and proposing control measures to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Let me begin with a brief introduction to this case. On June 5, 2025, a 41-year-old surveyor was working at a construction site in Bukit Mertajam, Penang. He was employed by a subcontractor and was performing verticality surveying work. This means he was checking that a building structure was properly aligned, a critical job during high-rise construction. He was working on the 8th floor near the lobby lift area when he fell through an opening in what is called a pressurization shaft. He fell approximately 27 meters, that is about the height of a 9-story building, and died at the scene. I chose this case because falls from height are the leading cause of death in Malaysia's construction industry. According to a 2025 study by Krishnasamy and colleagues, this remains a persistent problem despite existing safety regulation. This case shows us that even basic safety measures such as properly covering a hole in the floor which were not implemented, and a worker lost his life as a result. Now let me provide more detail about the incident and its causes. The incident occurred on the 8th floor. The victim was working near the lobby lift area. There was an opening for a pressurization shaft, essentially a hole in the floor that was part of the building's ventilation system. According to the Malay Mail report, this opening was covered only with plywood and fenced off. However, Door's preliminary investigation found that these measures were insufficient to support a person's weight or provide adequate protection. So what happened? The surveyor either stepped onto the plywood cover, believing it was solid floor, or he was walking near the fence area when the inadequate protection fell. The plywood gave way and he fell. Now let's look at the hazard involved. The primary hazard was a fall hazard, an unprotected opening in the floor. The secondary hazard was the plywood cover itself, which created a false sense of security. Workers might assume that if a hole is covered, it is safe to work on. That assumption proved fatal. What were the root causes? Based on my analysis and supported by recent research, there were several failures. First, there was inadequate hazard identification. The opening was not recognized as a critical danger. Second, engineering controls were insufficient, which the plywood is not a proper safety cover. Third, there was a lack of effective safe work procedures. According to Oni and colleagues in their 2025 study, weak safety culture and inconsistent enforcement remain major challenges in Malaysia construction industry. This case is a clear example of that. Let me now walk you through how this incident occurred step by step. Step 1. The surveyor arrived on the 8th floor to perform his surveying work near the lobby lift area. Step 2. In that area, there was a pressurization shaft opening. It was covered with plywood and had a fence around it. Step 3. The surveyor either stepped onto the plywood cover or was walking near the fence area. We don't know exactly which, but either way the protection fell. Step 4. The plywood gave way under his weight or the fencing fell to prevent his fall. Step 5. He fell 27 meters to a lower level. Step 6. He sustained fatal injuries and was pronounced dead at the scene. The exposure pathway was a fall from height. The impact of the fall caused fatal injuries. One worker died. Following the incident, Dutch issued 3 prohibition notices to the main contractor, halting all related work. The main contractor was also ordered to conduct an internal investigation and Dutch stated the legal action under the Occupational Safety and Health Act 1994 would be pursued if violations were found. Now, let's discuss what should have been done to prevent this incident. I will use the hierarchy of control, which ranks safety measures from most to least effective. At the top is elimination. This means removing the hazard entirely. Ideally, the building should have been designed so that workers never had to be near unprotected openings during construction. This is called design for safety, and as Hussein and College discussed in their 2026 study, it is a critical approach that needs stronger implementation in Malaysia. Next is engineering control. If the hazard cannot be eliminated, we must use physical safeguards. In this case, proper guardrails with a top rail, mid rail, and 2 boards should have been installed around the opening. If a cover was used instead, it must be strong enough to support at least twice the weight of a worker, clearly marked and securely fastened. The plywood cover in this case fell on all these requirements. This is administrative control. These are rules and procedures. The site should have had a permit system for any work near floor openings. Daily safety inspection should have been conducted to identify hazards like this, and all workers should have received proper training on fall hazards. According to Mushrooms and College in their 2025 study, consistent safety inspection and training are key factors in preventing construction accidents. Finally, at the bottom is personal protective equipment or PPE. This is the last line of defense. The worker should have been wearing a full body harness attached to a secure anchor point. However, PPE alone would not have prevented this fall if the anchor point was not available or properly used. The key point here is that multiple layers of protection should have been in place. Instead, there was only a piece of plywood. Let me conclude by summarizing the key lesson from this tragic case. This fatality was preventable. The victim fell through a floor opening covered only with plywood, a measure never designed to support a worker's weight. Proper guardrails or a load-weight cover would have saved his life. This case shows us what happens when we ignore the basics of workplace safety. Hazard identification was not done properly. Risk assessment was overlooked. Regular inspection failed to find and fix the unsafe cover. When these basic principles are ignored, the consequences can be fatal. Research by Krishnasamy in 2025 confirmed that falls from height remain the leading cause of construction fatalities in Malaysia. Despite regulations and safety guidelines, incidents like this continue to happen because safety is not consistently prioritized. As future safety professionals, engineers, or site supervisors, we must remember that safety is not optional. It is not something we do after the work starts. It must be planned from the beginning, enforced consistently, and never taken for granted. A simple guardrail or a strong cover could have saved a life. Let us not forget that. Thank you for your attention.